The dismissal bell was a fractured chime, a sound that promised freedom, but delivered only a brief, chaotic armistice. Alara Vance stood in the river of it, an island of calm in a torrent of small bodies wriggling into jackets and backpacks. Her second-grade classroom at Northwood Elementary, usually a sanctuary of organized creativity, had devolved into its daily 5-minute state of joyful entropy. Crayons were being swept into plastic bins, stray worksheets collected, and the air was thick with the scent of chalk dust, apple juice, and the faint, sweet perfume of childhood exertion. She moved through the room with an economy of motion honed over a decade of teaching. A gentle hand on a shoulder here, a quiet reminder about a forgotten lunchbox there. Her voice was a low, steady current beneath the babble. Aiden, your mother is waiting by the oak tree today. Maya, remember your reading log. Leo, fantastic work on your volcano diagram. Each interaction was specific, personal. She saw each child not as a part of a collective, but as a singular, brightly burning world. It was her gift and her burden. Lily Thorne was the quietest of these worlds. A small, serious girl with eyes the color of a stormy sea, the exact shade of her father's. She stood by her cubby, methodically placing her books into her bag, her movements precise and unhurried. She did not join the clamor. Lily had arrived in Alara's class 6 months ago, a silent little ghost wrapped in expensive wool coats. Her file had been thin, clinical: mother, deceased, father, Julian Thorne. The name meant nothing to Alara at first, just another parent to add to her contact list. But Lily's silence was a heavy, complicated thing. It was not the silence of shyness. It was the silence of observation. The kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. Alara had approached it with patience, not pressure. She learned that Lily loved ancient Egypt, that she drew intricate star charts in the margins of her notebooks, and that she felt safest in the library's nonfiction aisle. Alara didn't try to fill the girl's quiet with noise. She simply sat with her in it, offering books and colored pencils like diplomatic gifts. Slowly, carefully, the child had begun to open. A one-word answer became a sentence became a shared observation. Last week, for the first time, Lily had smiled at her, a small, tremulous dawn of a thing that felt like a tectonic shift. Your father is picking you up today, Lily, Alara said softly, stopping by her cubby. Lily nodded, zipping her bag with a final, decisive pull. He said he would be on time. It was a statement of faith. In Lily's world, her father's word was a structural element, as reliable as gravity. Alara's own smile was genuine. She had come to respect the quiet, formidable man who was Lily's father. Julian Thorne's presence was as contained and potent as his daughter's silence. He would appear at the classroom door at precisely 3:15, dressed in suits so perfectly tailored they seemed a part of his anatomy. He did not make small talk. He was not one for performative parental enthusiasm. He would simply meet Alara's eyes, a brief, assessing glance that held a universe of gratitude, and then his gaze would soften as it found his daughter. His power was not in what he said, but in the gravitational pull he exerted on the space around him. Conversations would dip. The air would still. He was a man accustomed to being the center of any room he entered, yet his focus was always singular, the small girl with his eyes. Today, however, the air shifted differently. As the last of the children trickled out, a new presence filled the doorway. It was not Julian Thorne. It was a woman, impossibly chic for a Tuesday afternoon pickup. She was poured into a crimson dress that was architecturally precise, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum with an aggressive, territorial sound. Her hair was a black, glossy helmet, her makeup a perfect mask of disdain. She carried a handbag that cost more than Alara's monthly salary, holding it like a weapon. Alara did not recognize her, but she recognized the type, the kind of parent who saw teachers as service staff. She braced herself, her professional smile locking into place. "Can I help you?" The woman's eyes, cold and dark, swept the room, dismissing the colorful drawings and laminated alphabet charts as if they were graffiti. They landed on Alara, narrowing with contempt. I'm looking for Alara Vance. I'm Alara Vance. The woman gave a short, sharp laugh, devoid of humor. Of course you are. She stepped fully into the room, letting the door swing shut behind her. The sound was unnervingly final. She stalked forward, her perfume, a heavy, expensive floral, invading the comfortable space. Lily, who had been about to walk past the woman, froze. She took a small step backward, closer to Alara, her hand clutching the strap of her backpack. I'm Isabella Rossi, the woman announced as if the name itself should carry the force of a physical blow. The name meant nothing to Alara, but she saw the flicker of recognition and something colder in Lily's eyes. The child's small frame went rigid. Is there something I can help you with, Miss Rossi? Alara kept her voice even, professional. She placed a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder, a small, protective gesture. Isabella's gaze dropped to Alara's hand, then back to her face. A cruel smile twisted her lips. You can help by understanding your place. She took another step closer, invading Alara's personal space. I know what you're doing. These little parent-teacher conferences, the concerned phone calls, the extra attention you're giving his daughter. Alara's calm began to fray at the edges. This was not about a grade or a playground dispute. This was personal, and it was happening in front of a child, her student. Miss Rossi, whatever this is about, it is not appropriate for my classroom, and it is certainly not appropriate to discuss in front of a child. Oh, don't you dare, Isabella hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Don't you dare hide behind her. This is about you, a little charity case teacher thinking she can claw her way into a world she doesn't belong in. Alara felt a cold dread mix with a rising tide of anger. She knew then exactly who this woman was. The ex, the predecessor, the ghost of a life Julian Thorne never, ever spoke of. He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate. You need to leave, Alara said. Her voice was no longer professionally pleasant. It was flat, final. Isabella laughed again, a sound like tearing silk. I'm not going anywhere. You think you're special because he smiles at you? Because he brings you coffee? Men like Julian have appetites. You're a novelty, a palate cleanser. That's all. She leaned in, her voice dropping further. Meant only for Alara, but Lily was too close, a silent, terrified witness. He is a thorn. I am a Rossi. Our families built this city. Our futures are bound together in ways your simple little mind could never comprehend. He will never, ever choose you. When he's done playing with you, he will come home. He always does. The words were designed to strip her bare, to reduce her to a temporary amusement, to paint her as a fool. Alara's mind raced. She thought about her student Lily, hearing this poison. She thought about Julian, a man who communicated in silences and small, significant gestures, who had slowly, respectfully begun to build a bridge into her life. A bridge this woman was now trying to burn. Get out of my classroom, Alara said again. The words were quiet, but they held the density of stone. For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed Isabella's face. She was not used to being disobeyed. Her arrogance surged to fill the space. You don't talk to me like that. She reached out, her fingers wrapping around Alara's arm, her nails digging into the fabric of her sleeve. You will listen. The hand connected with a shocking, intimate violence. Alara did not scream. She did not flinch. All the exhaustion of the day, the week, the years of quiet endurance coalesced into a single point of cold, diamond-hard clarity. Let go of my arm, she said. From the doorway, a new voice spoke. It was not loud. It was not angry. It was a voice of absolute, chilling calm. She told you to let go. The room seemed to drop in temperature. Isabella froze, her head snapping toward the door. Standing there was a man in a perfectly tailored gray suit, his posture utterly still. He was of average height, with thinning hair and unremarkable features, but his presence was anything but. He was Mr. Sterling, Julian Thorne's head of security, the man who sometimes picked Lily up when her father was in a meeting. He was always polite, always formal, and always radiated an aura of lethal competence. He did not rush, he was not performing. Isabella's manicured hand dropped from Alara's arm as if it had been burned. A flush of angry red climbed her neck. "Sterling, what are you doing here? This doesn't concern you." Mr. Sterling's eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, did not even flicker. They were fixed on Isabella. "Miss Rossi, you are trespassing on school property. You have assaulted a member of the faculty. You are causing distress to a minor. I believe it concerns me a great deal." He spoke in short, declarative sentences, each one a nail being hammered into a coffin. "I am here to see Julian," she snapped, trying to regain control. "He's supposed to be picking up Lily." "Mr. Thorne was delayed," Sterling said, his gaze unwavering. "He sent me in his place. He asked me to ensure Miss Vance and his daughter were not being disturbed." The implication was clear. Julian had known. He had anticipated this. The thought sent a strange, disorienting wave of something through Alara. It was not quite relief. It was something closer to shock. The feeling of being seen, correctly. Isabella's face contorted with fury and humiliation. She had come here to stage a triumphant reclaiming of her territory, to put the little teacher in her place. Instead, she had been intercepted by the staff. "You will tell Julian I was here," she snarled at Sterling. "That won't be necessary," Sterling replied, his voice still unnervingly placid. He took a single step into the room. It was not a threatening move, but it carried an immense weight. "You will come with me now. 2 of my associates are waiting by your vehicle. They will escort you off the premises." It was not a request. It was a statement of what was now happening. The power Isabella had wielded so arrogantly only moments before had evaporated, revealed as a hollow, performative thing. Sterling's power was different. It was deep, quiet, structural. It was the power of the man he worked for. Isabella stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a sullen, impotent rage. She knew this was a battle she could not win. Without another word, she spun on her heel and strode out of the classroom, a queen deposed by a quiet man in a gray suit. Sterling watched her go, his expression unchanging. He then turned his gaze to Alara, and for the first time a hint of something human entered his eyes. It might have been concern. "Miss Vance," he said, "are you all right?" Alara looked down at Lily, who was still pressed against her side, trembling slightly. She smoothed the child's hair, her own hand shaking. "We're fine, Mr. Sterling. Thank you." He gave a short, formal nod. "Mr. Thorne is on his way. He would like to speak with you when he arrives, if that's acceptable." Alara nodded, unable to find her voice. She felt a profound and sudden exhaustion, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving a hollow ache in its place. The classroom, her sanctuary, felt violated, tainted. Sterling's gaze softened almost imperceptibly as he looked at Lily. "Lily, your father will be here in 5 minutes. He asked me to tell you he is very sorry for the delay." The little girl just nodded, her face buried in Alara's side. Sterling lingered for a moment, a silent, watchful guardian in the doorway. He was waiting for Julian. He was ensuring the perimeter was secure. The corporate metaphor landed with jarring accuracy in Alara's mind. A threat had been identified and neutralized. The asset was being protected. She wasn't sure if she was the asset, or if Lily was, or if they both were. The thought was as unsettling as it was comforting. The silence in the room was different now. The peaceful end-of-day quiet had been shattered, replaced by the kind of silence that hums with unspoken things. Alara knelt down, bringing herself to Lily's eye level. "Are you okay, Sweet Pea?" she asked softly. Lily looked up, her stormy eyes wide and filled with a fear that was far too old for her years. She shook her head. "She's a mean lady," Lily whispered, her voice tight. "Yes," Alara said, her own voice thick. "Yes, she is." She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say it would be all right. She just agreed with the child's honest assessment. She wrapped her arms around Lily, holding her close, and felt the small body relax, just a fraction into the embrace. They stayed like that, two quiet islands in the aftermath of a storm, waiting for the sound of Julian Thorne's footsteps in the hall. 5 minutes later, precisely as Sterling had promised, Julian appeared. He did not rush. His movements were as deliberate and contained as ever, but Alara could see the tension in the set of his jaw, the dark fire banked in his eyes. He wore a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light in the hallway. He stopped in the doorway, his gaze taking in the scene. Ilara on the floor, holding his daughter, and Sterling standing like a statue a few feet away. His eyes met Ilara's over Lily's head. There was no apology in them, not yet. There was something else. A question, a confirmation, a grim acknowledgement of the line that had been crossed. He walked into the room, his expensive leather shoes making almost no sound. He knelt, mirroring Ilara, creating a small protective circle around his daughter. "Lily," he said. His voice was a low rumble, steady as iron wrapped in silk. The little girl turned her head, her face still half hidden against Ilara's shoulder. "Papa?" "I'm here," he said simply. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knew she wasn't. He just stated the fact of his presence. He reached out, his hand gently stroking her hair. It was a gesture of infinite tenderness. He looked at Ilara again, and this time, the words came. "I am sorry, Ilara, that this happened here, in your space." "It's not your fault," she said, though the words felt inadequate. "It is my responsibility," he corrected her, his voice flat with self-recrimination. "It will be handled. I promise you that." The word handled hung in the air. It was the same word Sterling had used, a corporate, sterile, and utterly final word. It meant erasure. It meant consequences. Ilara looked at this powerful, dangerous man kneeling on the floor of her second-grade classroom, his face etched with a quiet, controlled fury, and she believed him. Julian gathered Lily into his arms, rising in one fluid motion. The child clung to him, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. He settled her on his hip, her natural place. His gaze did not leave Ilara. "Sterling will drive you home," he said. It was not a question. "I have my car," she began, a reflexive assertion of her independence. "I know," Julian said, his voice softening slightly. "He will follow you. I want to know you're home and safe. I will come by later. We need to talk." Ilara hesitated. Her apartment felt too small, too fragile to contain a man like Julian Thorne and the magnitude of the problems that surrounded him. But looking at his face, at the earnest concern that had breached his formidable composure, she found herself nodding. "Okay. Thank you," he said, and the gratitude in his voice was for more than her acquiescence. It was for how she had protected his daughter, for her grace under fire, for being the calm center when his chaotic world had breached her walls. He turned to leave, Lily still tucked securely against him. At the door, he paused and looked back. "Ilara," he said, his voice low. "What Isabella said. About my intentions. About you." He paused, searching for the right words, a rare thing for him. "She is working from a version of me that is years out of date, a version that, frankly, was never accurate. Do you understand?" She looked at him, at the sincerity in his stormy eyes, and felt the knot of anxiety in her chest loosen, just a fraction. "I understand," she whispered. He gave a single decisive nod and was gone. The drive home was a blur. Ilara was hyper-aware of the black sedan, discreet and powerful, that stayed a steady 3 car lengths behind her. Sterling was a silent shadow, an extension of Julian's will. When she pulled into the parking lot of her modest apartment complex, he pulled in behind her, waiting until she had parked and gotten out of her car. He didn't get out of his. He simply watched, a silent sentinel, until she was safely inside her building. The heavy lock of the lobby door clicking shut felt like a final exhalation. Her apartment was her sanctuary. A small one-bedroom space filled with books, plants, and the warm clutter of a life lived thoughtfully. It smelled of old paper and fresh lavender. Tonight, it felt different. It felt vulnerable. She walked through the space, touching the spines of her books, watering a fern that was looking a little dry, performing the small rituals of normalcy in an attempt to ground herself. She changed out of her work clothes, a simple navy dress, and into soft gray sweatpants and an old college t-shirt. She made a cup of chamomile tea, her hands still trembling slightly. She sat on her sofa, tucking her feet under her, and stared at the wall. The scene in the classroom replayed in her mind, a reel of ugly, vivid images. Isabella's sneering face, the vicious grip on her arm, the terror in Lily's eyes. And underneath it all, Isabella's words, sharp and poisoned. He will never, ever choose you. Had she been a fool? She re-examined her relationship with Julian Thorne. It had grown so organically, so quietly, she had never stopped to define it. It began with Lily. Their shared concern for the child had led to longer conversations at pickup. He started arriving a few minutes early, and they would talk about books, about history, about the city. He had a dry, surprising wit that was startling in its contrast to his severe public persona. One rainy afternoon, he had found her stranded with a flat tire and had changed it himself, his suit jacket folded neatly on the passenger seat of his car, his white shirt cuffs rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He had not called for a service. He had simply done it. Afterwards, he insisted on taking her for coffee to warm up. They had talked for 2 hours. He had asked about her life, her dreams, why she became a teacher. He listened with an unnerving intensity, as if he were memorizing her. From then on, their interactions had shifted. They were no longer just a parent and a teacher. He would call her, his voice a low, pleasant rumble on the other end of the line, and ask her opinion on a new educational program his company was funding. He invited her and Lily to the museum one Saturday, and the three of them had spent the afternoon wandering through the Egyptian exhibit, with Alara and Lily chattering excitedly, and Julian watching them both, a rare, soft smile playing on his lips. It was a slow, respectful courtship based on recognition and safety rather than overt passion. He had never pushed, never presumed. He had made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. He saw her competence, her intelligence, her strength. He didn't try to save her from her life. He seemed to simply want to be a part of it. But Isabella's words had planted a seed of doubt. Was she just a novelty? An outsider he was temporarily slumming with before returning to his own kind? The world Isabella had described, of families and empires bound together, was so alien to Alara's reality. It was a world of structural power, of legacy, of blood. She was a teacher. Her power was in her patience, her empathy, her ability to coax a love of learning from a child. How could that ever compete? A sharp knock on the door startled her from her reverie. It wasn't a loud knock, but it was firm, confident. She knew it was him. She opened the door to find Julian Thorne standing in the hallway. He had changed out of his suit and was wearing dark trousers and a soft black cashmere sweater. He held a large paper bag that smelled deliciously of Thai food. He looked tired, but the tension had eased from his jaw. "I thought you might not have eaten," he said. She stepped back, allowing him to enter. He moved into her small living room, and it seemed to shrink around him, his presence too large for the space. But he was careful, his movements contained, as if he were afraid of breaking something. He placed the bag on her small coffee table. "I hope you like Penang curry," he said, looking at her, really looking at her. "I remembered you said it was your favorite." The small detail, the act of remembering, was so quintessentially Julian. It undid her a little. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she intended. He did not sit. He stood in the middle of her living room, his hands in his pockets, a posture that on anyone else would be casual, but on him looked like coiled stillness. "First, Lily is fine. She's with my mother. She drew you a picture of the goddess Nut protecting the world. She said you would understand." Alara's heart ached. "Tell her I love it." "I will." He paused, and the air grew heavy again. Now, about what happened today. There are no excuses for it. Isabella's behavior was abhorrent. That she did it in your classroom, in front of my daughter. It is the last mistake she will ever make regarding my family. The finality in his tone was absolute. Julian, what is she to you? Alara asked, the question she had been afraid to voice. Really? He met her gaze without hesitation. She is the daughter of a man my father was in business with, a man I have spent the last 5 years systematically and legally extricating myself from. Our families were allied once, a long time ago. My father arranged an engagement between us when we were young. It was a business arrangement. It was never anything more. I ended it the day I met Lily's mother. He took a breath, the story costing him something. After my wife died, Isabella and her father saw an opportunity. They assumed the old arrangement could be reinstated. They have been persistent. I have been clear. They have refused to listen. They believed their position was permanent. They believed our history gave them rights. They were mistaken. He was giving her the data, the facts. He was laying out the architecture of the situation so she could see it clearly. He was not making excuses. He was providing context. She said you would always go back, Alara said quietly, hating the vulnerability in her own voice. She said you'd choose her, your world. Julian moved then. He crossed the space between them in 2 silent steps. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He did not touch her. He just held her gaze, his own intense and unwavering. Alara, he said, his voice a low, serious murmur. There is no version of the future that includes her. There is no world in which I would choose her. She is a relic of a past I have actively dismantled. She represents a way of doing business, a way of life, that I find distasteful. He looked around her apartment, at the stacks of books, the thriving plants, the comfortable, lived-in peace of it all. This, he said, his gesture encompassing the room, but his eyes on her, is the world I am interested in. A world where things are real, where competence matters more than a name, where strength is quiet, your world. He finally reached out, but not to grab or possess. His hand came up and his fingers gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of warmth and connection that traveled straight to her core. I don't leave because things become complicated, Julian, she found herself saying, a quiet declaration of her own strength. A slow, genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features. It was a rare and beautiful thing. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. They ate the Thai food sitting on the floor of her living room, the containers spread out on the coffee table. They talked for hours. He told her about the slow, painstaking process of cleaning up his family's business, of turning it from something his father had built in the shadows into a legitimate, formidable global enterprise. He spoke of it like a massive, complex renovation. He was not ashamed of its origins, but he was determined to be its future. She, in turn, told him about her own life, about growing up in a family that valued education above all else, about her decision to teach in a public school instead of a private one because she believed the brightest minds were needed where the resources were scarcest. She spoke of her quiet, ordered life not as a limitation, but as a choice. He listened, absorbing every word. In his world, people postured and performed. They spoke in coded language and veiled threats. Alara spoke with a direct, unadorned honesty that he found as refreshing as a clean, cold glass of water. She was not trying to impress him or manipulate him. She was simply herself. And he was beginning to realize that was the most valuable commodity in the world. When he finally left, well after midnight, the feeling in the apartment had changed again. It no longer felt fragile. It felt like home, and it felt like the center of a very powerful, very quiet storm. The weeks that followed were a study in the slow burn. The incident at the school was never spoken of again. There were no more appearances from Isabella Rossi. It was as if she had been erased from the narrative. Ilara knew, with a certainty that was both comforting and terrifying, that Julian had handled it. Their routine deepened. Julian now picked Lily up from school every day. Sometimes he would come to Ilara's apartment for dinner. Other times, the three of them would go out, forming a small, self-contained family unit. They went to the planetarium. They had picnics in the park. They spent a rainy Saturday at Julian's penthouse, a vast, minimalist space high above the city, building an elaborate Lego castle on a Persian rug that was probably a priceless antique. One evening, Julian's mother, Eleonora Thorne, joined them for dinner. She was a formidable woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a regal bearing, wrapped in elegant silk. Ilara had been nervous, but Eleonora had greeted her with a warm, dry smile. She watched Ilara and Julian interact, her gaze missing nothing. She observed the easy way Ilara spoke to Lily, the way Julian's entire posture softened when he looked at Ilara. Late in the evening, while Julian was putting a sleepy Lily to bed, Eleonora turned to Ilara. "My son has excellent taste," she said, her voice raspy with age and expensive cigarettes. "In art, in business, and it seems, finally, in people." "I'm not sure what I am yet," Ilara admitted. Eleonora gave a throaty chuckle. "Oh, my dear, you are the future. That Rossi girl, she was always the past, a bill that needed to be paid. Julian has been paying his father's debts his entire life. I think he is finally finished." She reached across the table and patted Ilara's hand. Her skin was like paper, but her grip was strong. "You are good for him. You are good for the child. Do not be intimidated by our world. You have a strength that none of them possess. It is the strength of integrity. It is rare. Do not let him or anyone take that from you." The validation from the matriarch was another layer of the disorienting relief Ilara had been feeling for weeks. She was being seen and accepted into the heart of the Thorne family. But she was careful. She did not lose herself. She maintained her own life, her own apartment, her own job. She was a partner, not a project. She would not be absorbed. Julian, to his credit, seemed to understand and respect this implicitly. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give. He provided safety and resources, and she, in turn, provided a window into a world of warmth and normalcy that he and Lily desperately needed. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Isabella Rossi was living in a state of escalating delusion. After the humiliation at the school, her father, Marco Rossi, had been furious, not at her behavior, but at the public disrespect shown by Julian's employee. "He sends his dog to remove you?" Marco had roared, his face purple. "He will learn his place. The Thorne name is strong, but it is not the only name in this city." They had been cut off, the invitations stopped. The business channels went silent. Their calls to Julian went unreturned. For weeks, they were met with a wall of impenetrable silence. Isabella interpreted this not as a final severance, but as a cooling-off period. "He's punishing me," she told her father, pacing the length of his opulent, gilded office. "He's making a point. Give him a few weeks. He'll get tired of his little teacher. He needs me. He needs us." Her father, a man whose arrogance was matched only by his vanity, agreed. "He is overplaying his hand. Our shipping contracts are vital to his import division. He cannot cut us off completely without hurting himself." He was wrong. What Marco Rossi didn't know was that Julian had spent the last 2 years quietly building alternate shipping routes, establishing new partnerships, and creating redundancies throughout his supply chain. He had been planning to excise the Rossi family for a long time. Isabella's stunt at the school had simply moved up the timeline. Their fatal miscalculation was in believing they were a vital organ in the Thorne Empire. In reality, they were a vestigial appendix, inflamed and long overdue for removal. Isabella's desperation grew as the silence stretched from weeks into a month, then 2. The final straw was the invitation to the Obsidian Gala. It was the social and business event of the year, hosted by Thorne Industries. It was a display of Julian's power, a night where he held court. For years, Isabella had stood by his side at this event. This year, the invitation had not come. She saw it as a public, deliberate shunning, a final, unforgivable insult. "He wouldn't dare," she breathed, staring at a society blog announcing the event. "He would not show up to the gala alone. He needs a hostess. He needs a partner who understands that world." And then she saw it. A small, blurry paparazzi photo of Julian, Alara, and Lily leaving the museum. The caption read, "Billionaire Julian Thorne and his daughter spend the day with a mysterious new companion." A hot, blinding rage filled her. The teacher. It was still the teacher. "She will not take my place," Isabella vowed to her reflection. Her reflection, hard and beautiful, agreed. She began to form a plan, a desperate, theatrical, and utterly foolish plan. She would crash the gala. She would confront Julian publicly, in front of his peers, his partners, the entire city. She would remind him of his obligations, of their family's shared history. She would force his hand. She believed in her core that in a public forum, faced with the weight of tradition and the eyes of their world, he would have no choice but to capitulate. He would choose legacy over a fleeting affair. She would have a new dress made, a gown of shimmering silver, a warrior queen's armor. She would walk into his fortress and reclaim her throne. The night of the Obsidian Gala arrived, a cold, clear evening in late October. The venue was the city's Grand Museum of Art, its soaring marble halls transformed into a dark, glittering wonderland. The theme was midnight bloom, and the space was filled with arrangements of black orchids, deep purple calla lilies, and moody velvet red roses. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played a haunting, modern melody from a balcony overlooking the main hall. This was Julian Thorne's world in its purest form, a world of immense wealth, influence, and carefully curated power. The guest list was a roll call of the city's elite, titans of finance, political figures, old money scions, and the shadowy figures who operated in the spaces between. Alara felt as if she had stepped into another dimension. Julian stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. He wore a flawless black tuxedo, and the quiet authority that always surrounded him was amplified in this setting. He was not just a guest here, he was the sovereign. She wore an emerald green gown, a simple, elegant column of silk that Julian had insisted on having made for her. She had protested the expense, but he had been firm. "I want them to see you as I see you," he had said simply. Her hair was swept up, and the only jewelry she wore was a pair of simple diamond earrings, a gift from Eleonora. She felt elegant, but also exposed, a field biologist at a conference of astrophysicists. "Nervous?" Julian murmured, his voice close to her ear. "A little," she admitted. "This is a long way from finger painting and story time." He smiled, a private, intimate thing in the midst of the crowd. "You are the most capable person in this room," he said, a statement of fact. "You manage 22 chaotic little personalities every day. These people are amateurs by comparison." His confidence in her was a shield. She took a breath and let the tension ease from her shoulders. She was here with him. She was safe. They moved through the room, Julian making quiet introductions. He did not introduce her as his girlfriend or his date. He introduced her by name. "This is Alara Vance." He let her presence, her grace, her intelligence speak for itself. And it did. She found herself in a fascinating conversation with a federal judge about early childhood literacy programs and debating the merits of Impressionism with the museum's curator. She was not just holding her own, she was shining. Julian watched her, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper, something fiercely protective. The power shift happened just after 10 o'clock. A ripple of commotion started near the grand entrance. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The carefully managed atmosphere of the gala was punctured by a single discordant presence. Isabella Rossi stood in the arched doorway, a vision in shimmering silver. Her gown was magnificent, but her expression was brittle, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. She had not been invited, and her presence was a shocking breach of protocol. She scanned the crowd, her gaze hungry and predatory, until it found them, Julian and Alara. Julian's hand tightened fractionally on Alara's back. His body went utterly still. He did not turn. He had not needed to. He had felt her arrival like a change in atmospheric pressure. "Julian," Ilara whispered, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. "It's all right," he murmured, his voice a low, calm vibration against her skin. "Stay with me." Isabella began to move toward them, cutting a swath through the stunned crowd. People parted before her as if she were a contagion. She was a walking scandal, and everyone wanted a front row seat. Her face was a mask of righteous fury. This was her final, desperate gambit. She stopped a few feet from them, her chest heaving. All sound in the immediate vicinity had ceased. The string quartet, sensing the drama, trailed off into silence. They were in a bubble of pure, concentrated tension. "Julian," Isabella said, her voice ringing with theatrical betrayal. "How could you?" She gestured toward Alara with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "You bring her here? To this place? Our place." Julian turned slowly to face her. His expression was one of profound, weary disappointment. He looked not at an enemy, but at a problem that had refused to be solved quietly. "Isabella," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "you are not welcome here. You need to leave." "Leave?" She let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. "I will not be dismissed. Not by you. Not for her." She took a step closer, her voice rising. "You have an obligation, Julian. An obligation to me, to our families, to this legacy." She gestured around the grand hall. "This is our world. What does she know of it? She's a teacher. She belongs in a classroom with paste and dull scissors, not here." The insult was so crude, so public, that a collective gasp went through the onlookers. Alara felt a flush of heat rise in her cheeks, but she held her ground. She would not let this woman see her break. She met Isabella's crazed eyes with a look of cool, steady calm. Julian's face became a granite mask. The temperature around them seemed to drop another 20 degrees. He took a small, deliberate step forward, shielding Alara slightly with his body. "You are mistaken," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was the voice he used to dismantle companies, to end careers. "I have no obligation to you. Our families have no legacy. And as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, your father's company has no assets." A confused silence fell. Isabella stared at him, her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Julian did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every person in a 50-foot radius was straining to hear his quiet, devastating monologue. For the last several years, Marco Rossi has been using Rossi Shipping as a front to launder money. He was careless. He left a trail that my people found. Isabella's face went pale under her perfect makeup. "You're lying." "Am I?" Julian said. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out not a weapon, but a slim, black tablet. He touched the screen, and it lit up. "Your father leveraged every asset he had to cover a series of catastrophic losses. He took out loans, very large, very high-interest loans. Unfortunately for him, the entity that bought that debt was a shell corporation owned by me." He looked directly at Isabella, his eyes cold and empty of pity. "When he defaulted on his first payment this morning, I exercised my rights. I took possession of his collateral, which was, in short, everything. Rossi Shipping, its contracts, its vessels, its real estate holdings, even your father's home. It all belongs to Thorne Industries now." He tilted the tablet so she could see the screen. It was a series of legal documents, acquisition papers, foreclosure notices, all signed, all dated, all final. The papers, the kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. It was absolute. Isabella stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process the information. The foundation of her entire world, the source of her arrogance, her status, her name. It had all been a house of cards, and Julian had just blown it down with a quiet whisper. "No," she whispered. The word was a fragile, broken thing. No, my father. Your father is currently speaking with federal agents. Julian continued, his voice relentless. I imagine it will be a very long conversation. The Rossi name, which you seem to value so highly, will be worthless by morning. You have nothing. No company. No money. No influence. He paused, letting the full weight of his words land. You have no world to come back to. Isabella's perfect facade finally, catastrophically, shattered. Her face crumpled. A raw, animal sound of pure despair escaped her lips. Her body began to tremble, the shimmering silver dress now looking like a cheap tinfoil costume. She had built her entire identity on a lie, on a power she only ever borrowed, and it had just been foreclosed on. You can't, she stammered, looking around at the sea of faces, faces that had admired her, envied her, feared her. Now they were all staring at her with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. She was no longer a player. She was just the evening's entertainment. She dropped to her knees. The sound of her silk-clad knees hitting the hard marble floor was sickeningly loud in the silence. She began to sob, great, gulping, ugly sobs that racked her entire body. The warrior queen was just a broken woman in a ruined dress. Julian watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Two of his security men, dressed in tuxedos and indistinguishable from the guests, moved forward. They were not rough. They were efficient. They flanked her, each taking an arm. "No, please!" she begged, her words dissolving into incoherent wails. "Julian, please!" He did not look at her again. He turned his back as they lifted her to her feet and escorted her, stumbling and weeping, from the hall. He had already moved on. The problem was handled. A stunned electric silence remained. Julian stood for a moment, a quiet sovereign surveying his court. Then he turned to face the crowd. He took Alara's hand, his grip warm and firm, and drew her to his side. For those of you who do not know her, he said, his voice calm and clear, carrying easily through the hall, this is Alara Vance. He looked down at her, and his eyes were filled with a fierce, profound pride. For the past year, my company's foundation has been developing a new initiative for early childhood education in underserved communities. It is the most important project we have ever undertaken, and Alara has been its uncredited, and until now, silent architect. A murmur went through the crowd. This was not the narrative they had been expecting. She has been the most capable person in every room she has entered, Julian continued, his voice resonating with absolute conviction. And she is the heart of the future of my company, and of my family. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. She is my partner, in all things. It was a coronation. A public and undeniable validation. He had not just destroyed her enemy, he had elevated her in front of everyone to her rightful place. Not as a consort, but as an equal. A queen in her own right, her power derived not from a name or a legacy, but from her own undeniable worth. The applause started with one person, Eleonora Thorne, standing near the back, her face beaming. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire hall had erupted in applause. It was for her, for Alara Vance, the teacher. Alara looked out at the sea of faces, at the glittering, powerful people applauding her, and felt a slow, profound exhale release from her lungs. The weight she had carried for so long, the feeling of being underestimated, of being unseen, of having to fight for every inch of respect, it was gone. In its place was a quiet, steady peace, a sense of rightness. Julian leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "I believe they like you," he whispered, a hint of dry wit in his voice. She looked up at him, and for the first time in a long, long time, a real smile reached her eyes. It was bright and free. "They have good taste," she whispered back. They didn't stay much longer. They slipped away through a private exit, leaving the gala buzzing with the story that would dominate the city's gossip for months. They rode back to the penthouse in a comfortable silence, his hand holding hers on the leather seat between them. When they walked into the apartment, the city lights spread out before them like a blanket of fallen stars. Lily was asleep in her room. The Lego castle they had built sat on the rug, a testament to their new, small kingdom. Alara walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the sprawling metropolis. It no longer felt alien or intimidating. It just felt like a city, a place where people lived and worked and built things. Julian came to stand beside her, his presence a warm, solid anchor. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood there for a long time, just breathing together, watching the distant headlights of cars moving on the freeway. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "For them, yes," he said. "For us, it's just beginning." He paused. "My mother is already planning the wedding. She's already annoyed. She says you'll want something simple, and I'll want something secure, and it will be a logistical nightmare." Alara laughed, a soft, happy sound. "She's not wrong." "She also wants to know if you can get her a title," Julian added, his voice dry. "She's thinking Queen Mother has a nice ring to it." Alara leaned her head back against his chest, a feeling of deep, profound peace settling over her. This was her life now, complicated and dangerous and strange, but it was also filled with a fierce, quiet love, a brilliant little girl who drew pictures of goddesses, and a man who had dismantled an empire to keep her safe. It was a family built not on legacy or obligation, but on honesty and respect, and the daily choice to stay. Some people will take your silence for weakness, your grace for compliance. They will see your quiet competence and try to exploit it, believing their noise is the same as power. But true power doesn't need to scream. It works quietly, in the background, signing the papers, securing the foundations, and changing the world, not with a bang, but with the quiet, final click of a pen. It waits and it watches, and it knows that in the end, character is the only asset that can never be foreclosed on. Drop a green heart in the comments if you know Ilara earned every bit of her victory. We think Julian handled that perfectly, but tell us what you would have done in his place. If this story moved you, please hit that like button right now. It helps us know what kind of stories you want to see more of. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Hit that button and the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. A new era for the Thorne family has just begun, and the challenges they face are far from over. The Rossi downfall has created a power vacuum, and as they say, nature abhors a vacuum. The story of the quiet sovereign and his architect queen is just getting started. Subscribe to see how it unfolds.